I'm so excited that you chose to join us for another episode. I've got an awesome guest. We're going to talk about some current events and also celebrate uh, Veterans Awareness Month that's going on this month. But I want to first introduce the person who I'm so excited to be here with me, Neil Woods, who is the president of Woods and Woods, which is one of the country's biggest veterans disability law firms. They're also a partner of my firm, and I'm so glad that Neil, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to chat it up with me. How you doing today, man?
I'm doing really good. Thanks for having me. I always enjoy talking to you. So, this just gave me another excuse.
Most people do enjoy
Yeah.
talking to me. I don't know what it is. Um, so yeah, it's veterans Veterans Awareness Month. Is that the proper term for it? I'm probably saying it wrong.
Yeah, yeah. Well, see, here every month is,
Every
so.
month is veterans. Well, it's especially Veterans Awareness Month here in our Social Security Disability law firm. Um, but I just thought that this would be a perfect time to sit down with you, talk about a little bit of the overlap between what you do and what I do. But first, just give us some background. Tell us what makes somebody come to you and your firm. Why would I hire a veterans disability law firm?
Yeah, so typically, here's who most of our clients are that come to us. They've fought the VA for years. They've gotten tired of using free veteran service officers who have just kept them in this never-ending denials. And finally, they are ready to fight the VA with good evidence and win their cases. So that's typically who's coming to us. They've tried to get benefits before, and it just didn't work.
And so it doesn't work. What do I do? Do I call you? Do I try and appeal on my own? How does the process work when I apply for these benefits and they tell me no?
Yeah, so, I think that a lot of veterans out there don't quite realize how complex that VA disability law really is. And I think that is one of the issues that we see out there with a lot of the VSOs. They just file some forms, some paperwork, and they never really develop evidence. They don't get psychological exams. They don't, collect buddy statements and lay statements. So, just like with any other area of law, the way that you really win VA disability cases is with good evidence. Well, not that all the VSOs out there are bad people. It's just, let's say that you're the county's only veteran service officer. And let's say that you have, 1,000 people calling you a month. Well, you're not going to have the time to develop these relationships with the client, with doctors, and get the reports needed to show that the conditions come from service. So that is really the biggest difference, is that we know how to use evidence that the VA wants, and the veteran service officers, just a lot of them don't have the time or the resources.
That's so interesting because you're just kind of like addressing something that I've always wondered, and I don't operate in your space, you know. So we live in the Social Security Disability ERISA world over here. We've never touched veterans disability as a practice area, but I've always wondered because um, you know, I see I live in Cleveland, and the county that I live in is called Cuyahoga County, and
Yes.
literally on the side of the buses, what they're advertising are free veterans services where they will help you get your ratings increased. And
Yeah.
so I think a lot of people see that and think, why would I call a lawyer who I'm going to have to pay to do this for me when I could call this number and
Yeah.
get it for free? So really what it comes down to, I mean, are those, you call them VSOs? Is that what it is?
Yeah, they're veteran service officers. And, if you have a really simple claim, let's say just a one issue, two issue claim, they might be a really good resource for you. So let's just say something simple like tinnitus. It's pretty impossible for anybody in any branch of the service to not leave with tinnitus. I mean, you're around a lot of noise. And so I think that is where they do have a place here in society, and they do a good job, is with simple claims. Now, when you have more complex claims, I think that is when you really need to reach out to an attorney, because that is where evidence is going to matter. One of the big things is especially now, one of the big issues is toxic exposures across military bases. So, that requires a lot of evidence. That requires submitting medical journals. You got to prove not only that the veteran has this condition, but you have to show the causation. How did it happen? And that's a big difference between Social Security and VA. Is I feel like in Social Security you're proving the disability, but here we not only have to prove that they had the disability, we have to prove how it happened, and then we have to prove the severity of it, which is for the rating. So that is where this gets really, really complex. And I think that some of the veteran service officers are falling short on the results that veterans are getting.
So if I'm a person who sees that bus ad, I'm just sitting on the bench waiting for public transportation, and I'm thinking, oh, I know I need some kind of help. How do I decide whether I have one of those one or two issue simple things, or I've got a complex situation where I need to pick up the phone and call Neil Woods in Indiana right now because he's going to take care of me and my family? Is there a way that somebody could tell that difference?
I think it's going to be hard for some veterans, but like I said, if you have a single issue, like a tinnitus claim, but one of the ways too that I think veterans can do that is simply they can just call us, and here's what I mean by that is we don't charge for help with VA disability applications. So we have, every month, hundreds of clients that never pay us a fee. We help them file their applications. We kind of teach them what they need to put on there. And, and then when they get a decision in from the VA, they don't owe us anything. So, and we have regularly a lot of veterans that do win in that process. And, they always ask, well, what do I owe you? And people aren't used to the lawyer saying, well, nothing.
You know,
You mentioned tinnitus, and that's one of the things that I wanted to ask you about because tinnitus, I believe, is one of the conditions, and I think some mental health issues that they're going to change the evaluation criteria for. They're talking about it. Tell me
yeah,
about that, Neil.
Yeah, so there's some conditions right now that I've seen in the media where they're talking about veterans getting benefits for acne and stuff like that. I don't think that the people writing these news stories understand what that really means. So let me use the acne one, because when you read in the newspaper that veterans are getting disability benefits for acne, yeah, it is kind of a little, you feel like maybe they're taking advantage of the system. So here's what a lot of those acne ratings are really for. They're Vietnam veterans who have chloracne all over their body from exposure to Agent Orange. So that's what we're really talking about. When you just read the surface of these news stories, it sounds like these veterans are taking advantage of the system. And I promise you they're not. When you have chloracne all over your entire body, that is severely painful. It's embarrassing. It goes on and on. I mean, nobody would trade places with some of these people and what they're going through. And tinnitus, let's use that for another one. That's one I've seen the media kind of attack recently too. So let's just say that, you went into the military so that you could exercise your right to get the GI Bill and go to college. Well, desk jobs require, typically using a telephone. And so you get into these things where you start limiting the ability of the veteran out there to have some of these positions and jobs that are out there. And that's really what VA disability is. It's workers' comp for veterans. It's this, hey, if you join the military and we diminish your ability to go out and work, we're going to pay you for it. And that's what it really is.
It's so interesting. I don't know why I've never made that link in my head that VA disability is just workers' compensation for veterans. You're a workers' compensation attorney. And I was
that's
even
it's
going to make that
yeah,
parallel earlier when you were talking about how you have to prove causation and severity,
yeah.
and I don't. Right? It's very different, which I want to talk about that too. But workers' comp for veterans, that's all VA disability is.
It really is because veterans can't sue the federal government over these conditions under the Federal Tort Claims Act. They're barred from it. So this was the system that was set up many years ago. It's changed a lot, but I mean, it really started after the Civil War. And so, you know,
Civil War, that just happened, right?
Yeah, yeah, it feels like yesterday, you
That's
know,
right. It four score and uh,
many years ago.
many years ago. Um, on that topic, though, because I think that something that my listeners, the people who've become familiar with the Social Security disability evaluation process, don't understand is how the VA considers ratings. So, in my world, yes, we don't need to prove causation. We do need to prove severity, but the severity, there's only one level of it, which is that there's no work at all that my client can do. Um, but with the VA system, there's people who are considered 20% disabled, 80% disabled. Explain a little bit about how that works and how the conditions come together. You can add pieces together. Just explain it to somebody who knows nothing.
yeah, so the VA is going to offer, if they find that your condition is service connected, they're going to give you a VA disability rating, which is in increments of 10%. There's actually a 0%, which means, yes, it is service connected, but it's not actually causing any issues. But you can get all the way up to 100% on each one of these ratings. So I'll just give a quick overview of like a generalized anxiety disorder. You may get a 30% rating if you have generalized anxiety disorder, but it only affects you a couple days a year. So you may get a 70% rating, much higher. And if, let's say that you have lost jobs over it, if you have, you're afraid to go anywhere, if you have so many panic attacks or hospitalizations from it. So, and then whatever rating that you're given is what the VA pays you. So each rating has a different monthly payment attached to it.
Okay. So, and it's not linear, right? So somebody who's 20% rated doesn't get 20% of the benefits of somebody who's 100%. The increase is, it's almost
Yeah.
like exponential.
It is, because there's like about $1,000 jump between a 90 and 100% rating. So, we have vets come to us all the time and go, look, I have a 90% rating, I'm happy with it. And you look at their paperwork and you go, hey, you should have a 100% rating. And they go, I don't feel like fighting for that. And you're like, it's $1,000 a month. And they go, really? They go, well, all the other jumps, 70 to 80, 80 to 90, they weren't that big. And you go, yeah, but that's because this last rating is big. And, because most of our veterans, they're not looking for handouts. That's just not the type of people they are. They're very proud. And, but, when you tell them, like, hey, you are owed this, it was a part of your contract when you signed with the military. And this last jump is $1,000 a month. So I think that some of them then go forward with it.
And there's other things within that. So you can get to 100, but then isn't there like a permanent disability designation or tell us about that?
Yeah, so there is what we would call a permanent and total ratings, or permanent rating. So basically that means you're locked in on that rating and the VA will not reduce your rating. But then there's this other big category that a lot of veterans don't know about, and it's called total disability, individual unemployability. So these are the cases where a veteran can no longer work from their service-connected conditions. And this is where your clients and my clients, there's going to be a lot of overlap. Because, for Social Security, they can no longer work. And then in the let's just say IU benefits going forward to save a whole lot of words, but individual unemployability benefits, IU benefits. These are really designed for veterans that can no longer work from their service-connected conditions. And what they do is you don't actually have to receive a 100% rating to be paid a 100% rating. Now here's how that works. And the reason that the VA set this system up is sometimes conditions prevent you from working, especially when you consider the other conditions that people have, but they cannot get to a 100% rating, and they cannot work. So there's a couple different pathways to get there with your ratings, and So that's the big thing that a lot of veterans don't know about is individual unemployability benefits. And they pay the same as 100% rating. And you can get them at the same time as you can your SSDI benefits.
Now, while you are have a 100% rating from the VA, can you keep working?
So if you have a 100% rating, you, uh, you can. So now, if it's based on individual unemployability, there's only a couple ways you can work. One would be sheltered, or it'd be sheltered in marginal employment. And here's what that means: is um, let's say that you work for your brother-in-law, and they let you get away with a whole lot of stuff that other places wouldn't. So let's say that you have severe PTSD and you yell at customers and you just walk out of the job and go home some days because your anxiety or depression or whatever gets so bad. But your brother-in-law lets you stay there because you are the brother-in-law, you know?
Right.
Those are what we would call marginal and sheltered work environments. So veterans can still work in those marginal and sheltered work environments under individual unemployability benefits. But if you have a strict 100% rating not based on individual unemployability, you can work.
Interesting. Interesting. Because so it's very different than how Social Security works, where either you're disabled or you're not, and you can work, but there's just an earnings cap
Yeah.
on the amount of money that you can work, which this year it's $1,620 per month. Um, I want to go back to what you told me earlier about how you don't read the news. So I'm going to be delivering you the news today, Neil.
Okay.
I'm sorry that I'm not delivering you some coffee and donuts to take with your news, but
Yeah.
there was, and I think it's a part of a series, but there was just a big article in the Washington Post that I'm sure you're not familiar with, from this week where they were quote unquote exposing fraud in the VA disability system. And but before I even ask you to respond to this, I want you to come out and hear where I fall on this. You know, I go on social media right after, and even though normally, I think the Washington Post is pretty friendly to the disability community, at least in terms of Social Security goes. I am so disappointed in their reporting because what it does is it creates, and the examples that they used were of people who were claiming that they were paralyzed, but meanwhile there's videos of them doing backflips on trampolines and
Yeah.
driving trucks and all this other stuff. But what it does is when you highlight these truly isolated incidents, it creates this perception among the layperson that everybody who's collecting
Yeah.
disability benefits
Yeah.
is scamming the system. And it keeps people who need the benefits away from applying.
Yep.
It makes it harder for the people who are applying to get approved, and it puts a target on the back of the people who are already receiving them.
I agree.
Um, and I just kind of want to hear how this is working its way through the veterans disability community and what the response has been to it.
So, the first thing, people that commit fraud in this system should be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. I mean, that's just the way it should be. And so I didn't really like the way that the Washington Post reported it. I think it was worthwhile to talk about, but here's the thing is, I think the article made it sound a little bit like it was much more widespread than it is. So the VA recoups every year a lot of money from fraud. I mean, they figure it out and they go after these people. They don't just keep paying them and allow it. And is the VA doing a perfect job of policing fraud in the system? No, I don't think they're doing a perfect job, but when they have knowledge of it, do they take action? Yes, that is absolutely what we have seen. And I'll be honest, we've seen a few times where clients have submitted records to us that we know aren't true. And as an attorney, we have a duty to discharge that client and no longer represent them. So, People do try fraud, but here's the thing: most of these folks are not committing fraud. I think what the Washington Post also should do is a story that meets some of these people and really talks to them, so that there's this positive spin on it too. Because I think of just this one veteran. He had his Navy reunion here in our hometown. So we went to go visit him. He was this guy that lived across country and the nicest man you could ever meet. And he fought for our country in Vietnam, and it took him 25 years to fight the VA. And then he called us. So those are the people that I really think of when I hear these fraud stories. It's people like Dan, who, the nicest old man who rides around on his rascal scooter because he's disabled. And those are the people I really think about. So I hope that these news stories about fraud in the VA system doesn't paint everybody with the same brush.
And I don't know, it just kind of eats at me because I saw in the Social Security world, there's there's cases like this that come about from time to time, but the big one was a lawyer who was involved with the fraud. This is about 15 years ago. A guy named Eric Kahn. You're smiling because we all remember that. And
Yes.
the systemic change to respond to one or two bad actors was crazy. I mean, truthfully, Eric Kahn plays a role in the story of me starting my own law firm because the approval rates dropped in half nationally, meaning millions of disabled Americans
Yes.
couldn't get disability benefits, and their stories were never told, by the way.
Yeah.
Um, and in the process, the firm that I was working at was like, we don't want to do Social Security anymore. And I was like, well, I really like helping these people, so I'm going to start my own law firm. And that's why you and I are sitting here talking today. So I guess there's a silver lining, but man, it really, really scares me because those positive stories aren't
I know.
told enough. In my world, and I want to ask you if you see it in your world, what I see far more often is the person who I read these records, and I know there is no way on God's green earth that this person would be able to maintain full-time employment with the records that I'm reading, and they run into you know maybe a doctor who's not doing a perfect job of documenting everything, or they run into a judge who approves 10% of the cases that they review and has, a certain MO for denying everybody.
Yes.
And those stories need to be told alongside, but they're just not. So that's why you and I are doing it right now, Neil.
No, I agree. And the Eric Kahn thing was one of the most egregious things I've ever seen. And I mean, paying kickbacks to a judge. So, but here's the thing too: is most law firms out there are following the ethics rules. I mean, we are representing clients that we know are actually deserve these benefits. Because I mean, what lawyer wants their, well, besides Eric Kahn, wants their law license pulled, and to lose their law firm? And so there's a few of them out there, I'm sure, but when you really look at what most of the Social Security and the VA disability law firms are doing, they're ethical, good people who are trying to help folks.
Yeah, 1,000%. I mean, I didn't ask you, the background, your story, but I got into this work because I wanted to help people. I'm sure you did too. You're nodding your head for those who are listening. So Neil Woods got into VA disability because he wants to help people. I'll be your voice here. And that's how most people end up in our profession. The reality is, if you and I wanted to just see how much money we could make, we'd become medical malpractice attorneys. We wouldn't have to deal with thousands of clients screaming at us at a time to not get paid, to work on contingency in fields that, either I win or I lose, and I take a loss on every single case that I lose. But we do it because we believe in the work, and we believe in what we do is awesome, because when we succeed, we're able to help someone restore their dignity. We're able to make sure that they have food on their table that they wouldn't have had otherwise. And it's just a bad business decision too to help people that don't qualify, because for every one out of 100,000 that gets pushed through that's clearly faking, I don't want to be losing my money on helping those other 99,999 who don't.
I know. I
So
know. Well, that's
it's bananas.
But the thing is, there's in any industry out there, there's going to be the Eric Cons. There's going to be the people who take advantage of any industry out there. And the one thing I can say about the legal community is it really does a pretty good job of policing itself. I mean, when fraud or theft or not unethical things are found out, I know here in Indiana, they're happy to take away your law license when you do bad things, and they should. They should. And so, that's one thing that I really had when like new staff come on board. They're like, wow. Because, for example, I teach them the ethics seminar for all new staff. And I always tell them, look who's sitting in here teaching this. It's the owner of the company. This is how important it is. We follow these things. And I don't know, I think a lot of people have a misconception about lawyers and the ethics side, and they don't understand how much we really are following it and concerned about it day to day.
Yeah, 1,000%, Neil. I want to kind of circle back to, our purpose for being here, for, the purpose for making sure that you and I were chatting in October, which is once again, Veterans Awareness Month. I want to tell us about our firms are both going to be donating to a charity that I know your firm supports. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so Lucas Place 2 is an organization here in Evansville, is a housing for transitional veterans. So this is actually a group that we were involved with before we even got into VA disability benefits many years ago. These are good people, and they're doing good things, because a lot of veterans, they don't need a lifetime handout when they get into these rough situations. They just need a time period to be given a home, to access resources that are available to them, and get back out there and just kind of, I don't know, rejoin society. And that is one of the things I think that Lucas Place 2 really does well, is they give people just this time period to get their lives together and go out there and once again be productive members of society. So, what a great mission. It's kind of hard to not like these folks.
Oh, no, I love that. And I'm so glad that you're leading us towards them, and that our firms are going to be able to make an impact. I know you guys regularly participate in their events, but thank you for introducing us and allowing us to participate alongside you. It's just one more way that I'm excited to be able to partner with Woods and Woods going forward. And I want to just once again, just thank you for giving me your time today and chatting it up a little bit.
Yeah, anytime, Michael, because, like I said, our clients, they have a lot in common. And, you have a lot of veterans clients, and a lot of them don't realize that they're eligible for both benefits. And same thing with our veterans clients. They don't realize they can get Social Security at the same time.
Right. Well, thank you again, Neil. And I look forward to catching up with you again on here soon. I'm sure that the news will bring us more things for us to talk about.
I guarantee there will be some things to talk about over the next couple of years.
All right. Well, join us next time on the Disability Download. This has been a great episode, and we'll see you guys soon.